Welcome, curious minds, to Congress in Context, your go-to guide for understanding the latest from Capitol Hill. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the whirlwind of recent congressional activity. We'll be focusing on key legislative debates, votes, and discussions that, well, truly impact you and your community. Our mission, to cut through the noise, highlight some, genuinely surprising facts, and offer a balanced perspective on what's been happening in Washington, D.C.
It really has been a week packed with significant legislative moves, intense partisan divides, and even some pretty powerful moments of reflection.
Yeah, it's kind of a dizzying picture.
It is. But we're here to connect the dots, showing you not just what unfolded, but maybe why these decisions might ripple through your everyday life.
Okay, let's start unpacking this. The biggest legislative highlight from the House, the passage of H.R. 1, officially known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
Right. And this bill is being hailed as a major legislative victory for the Trump administration and congressional Republicans.
Proponents are really emphasizing its aim to, well, rebuild the economy, reward work, and protect what they're calling the American dream.
And what's interesting here are the very specific benefits supporters are pointing to for, average Americans.
Like what?
Well, for instance, they claim that in a district like Pennsylvania's 15th, almost 67,000 families could benefit from an expanded child tax credit.
Okay.
And over 7,600 family farms are apparently protected from the death tax. They also highlight that nearly 40,000 small businesses are safeguarded by a 20% deduction, which should encourage reinvestment.
Right, reinvestment.
And an impressive 96% of taxpayers will supposedly benefit from a double standard deduction, simplifying filing for a lot of people.
And it goes beyond just tax benefits, doesn't it? I heard talk about deficit reduction.
Yes, the bill is also claiming a substantial $120 billion in deficit reduction, along with protections for family farmers.
It's being framed as a generational victory, I think was the phrase.
That, and a sizable down payment on the full farm bill. From the proponents' view, this aligns directly with the America First agenda.
Which means?
Well, things like eliminating wasteful spending, securing the border, unleashing American energy dominance, extending Trump tax cuts, creating jobs, and, importantly, protecting Medicare and Social Security. That's the pitch.
And they're projecting actual dollar savings for families.
Yeah, we're told it's projected to save average Texas families, for example, around $3,000 next year.
Okay, $3,000. And this raises that big question about tackling the national debt, right? How does this bill approach that, according to its supporters?
Well, supporters believe it actively combats the debt by trimming mandatory spending programs. A key piece of this strategy is including work requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents in means-tested programs like Medicaid.
Work requirements for Medicaid? That sounds controversial.
It is, but polling they cite suggests 62% American support for this kind of measure. It's framed as, common sense and a way to reduce red tape to foster economic growth.
And what about security? Border security, things like that?
The bill specifically funds Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, to hire and train personnel. And it allocates money for the Department of Justice to combat drug trafficking and illegal immigration crimes.
Okay, now that's the proponent's view, the case for the bill.
Yeah.
But the opposition has a very different take, to put it mildly.
Oh, absolutely. They're describing H.R. 1 as the big ugly betrayal, or just the big ugly bill.
Wow.
Some are even calling it one of the most unpopular bills in the history of the country, and the anticipated impacts on healthcare are particularly stark.
What are they projecting there?
They project that 17 million Americans, and that includes 9 million Medicaid recipients, could lose healthcare coverage within about 18 months.
18 months. That quickly.
That's the projection. Yeah. And it's largely attributed to those new work requirements we mentioned and complex paperwork.
Like we saw in Arkansas before.
Exactly. In Arkansas, when they tried something similar, reporting portals were apparently closed at night sometimes, making it incredibly difficult for people to comply.
And what about hospitals, especially rural ones?
Well, there are immediate concerns there, too. At least 300 rural hospitals are reportedly at immediate risk of closing.
Immediate risk.
That's the term being used. And we're already seeing governors in at least 8 states calling special sessions for stopgap subsidies just to try and prevent closures.
That sounds like a potential crisis brewing in many communities. What about health insurance premiums for, everybody else?
Predictions there are equally grim, according to opponents. Tens of millions of people could end up paying hundreds of dollars more per month starting next year.
Hundreds more a month.
Yeah, with an average 75% increase projected for Affordable Care Act recipients. And this isn't just limited to ACA plans. It's expected to impact private insurance holders as well.
Okay, so healthcare is a major point of contention. What else are critics worried about?
Beyond healthcare, the bill faces criticism for cuts to nutritional assistance, SNAP specifically.
Food stamps.
Right. Approximately 5 million people are projected to lose some or all of their assistance. And, the average amount we're talking about is only about $6 per person per day.
$6 a day for food. That's
Yeah.
barely anything. And I'm also hearing energy costs might go up.
That's right. Critics argue the bill's policies effectively throttle the cheapest energy sources, like wind and solar,
Throttling renewables.
which they say could lead to rising electricity costs and maybe even reduce power quality, think potential blackouts or brownouts.
So the overall picture from opponents is
They essentially characterize this bill as the largest transfer of wealth from the working class to the top 1% in our nation's history, arguing it cuts essential programs primarily to fund corporate and billionaire tax breaks.
it really does paint two incredibly different pictures of the same bill. It's striking how widely the predictions diverge for something so fundamental.
It really is.
And I think this stark division on H.R. 1 truly reveals more than just policy disagreement. It feels like a fundamental clash over the role of government, doesn't it? In the economy, individual welfare.
Exactly. It's a debate that's, defined American politics for decades and clearly isn't going the way. It really underscores the deep ideological fault lines on Capitol Hill right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But while H.R. 1 definitely captured headlines with all that partisan fighting, it's important to remember Congress isn't always divided.
That's true.
In fact, this week also saw a flurry of other legislation pass, sometimes with this rising bipartisan support, especially in areas like technology and infrastructure.
Yeah, places you might not always expect agreement.
Right. So let's shift focus now to some of those maybe quieter but still important legislative wins from the House.
Sounds good. We saw a notable focus on technology and national security. For example, H.R. 1770, the Consumer Safety Technology Act.
Okay, what does that do?
It passed the House with strong support, 336 yeas to 36 nays. Basically, it pushes the Consumer Product Safety Commission to pilot artificial intelligence, AI, for tracking injury trends, identifying hazards, monitoring recalls.
Using AI for safety. Makes sense.
Yeah, and it also directs the Commerce Secretary and the FTC to study blockchain technology.
Like Bitcoin tech.
Right, that kind of decentralized system. And also digital currency, or tokens, specifically looking at consumer protection angles, like unfair or deceptive practices.
That sounds like a pretty smart step, trying to get government up to speed with new tech. And it passed easily, you said.
Very strong bipartisan support. And there were others in the tech space, too. H.R. 1709, the Understanding Cybersecurity of Mobile Networks Act, also passed.
Mobile networks. So, cell phones.
Essentially, yes. It requires the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA, to report on cybersecurity vulnerabilities in our current wireless networks and assess how well carriers are handling threats. It's seen as a key bipartisan step for privacy and security.
Good. We need that.
And then there's H.R. 1765, the Promoting United States Wireless Leadership Act. This one directs the Assistant Secretary of Commerce to encourage U.S. participation in global standard-setting bodies for next-gen wireless, think 5G, and looking ahead, 6G.
Why is that important?
Well, it's really about countering influence from adversaries in these international groups and making sure the U.S. stays a leader in critical communication infrastructure, national security, and economic competitiveness, basically.
So these bills seem like a collective effort to kind of secure our digital future and economic leadership. Makes sense. Were there other areas where Congress found common ground beyond tech?
Absolutely. There was significant bipartisan work on infrastructure and public safety, too.
Okay.
For instance, H.R. 3657, the Hydropower Licensing Transparency Act. This requires FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to submit annual reports to Congress on hydropower licensing applications.
Why the focus on hydropower licensing?
Well, the process can take a really long time, like 7 to 10 years. And about 15% of our hydropower capacity is up for relicensing in the next decade. So this aims for more transparency to help keep those clean energy sources online.
Got it. Clean energy infrastructure. What else?
A very practical one.
Yeah.
H.R. 900, the Sinkhole Mapping Act.
Sinkholes? Really?
Yeah. It directs the U.S. Geological Survey to study what triggers sinkholes, storms, droughts, and develop public maps of high-risk zones. It's described as a common-sense, forward-looking investment to save lives and reduce damage. especially with, changing climate patterns.
Huh. Never thought about a Sinkhole Mapping Act, but it sounds useful. And what about that long-running COA project I read about?
Yes, H.R. 10044 allows the Secretary of the Interior to issue more permit renewals for the COA project. It's a hydroelectric facility in Sequoia National Park that's actually been operating since 1907.
Wow, since 1907.
Yeah, so this bill just ensures it can continue generating clean energy. So you see, while H.R. 1 was really contentious, these other bills show Congress can still work across the aisle on tangible issues affecting people.
Okay, good to hear. Now, shifting over to the Senate, what did they manage to pass this week? Anything notable?
In the Senate, we saw two bills pass that are worth mentioning. First, S-433, the National Manufacturing Advisory Council Act.
Manufacturing Council. What's the goal?
It establishes a National Manufacturing Advisory Council within the Commerce Department. Its job is basically to provide independent advice and recommendations on U.S. manufacturing competitiveness, things like workforce, supply chains, and new technologies. It's about keeping our manufacturing sector strong.
Okay. And the second one?
The second was S-283, the Illegal Red Snapper and Tuna Enforcement Act.
Catchy name. What does it do?
It requires NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to develop a chemical analysis method to figure out where seafood actually comes from, its country of origin.
Why is that needed?
It's a direct measure to combat illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, IUU fishing. Basically, fish caught and sold outside the rules, which undermines legal fisheries and can damage fish stocks. This helps track where the fish really came from.
Interesting. Using science to fight illegal fishing. Okay, now let's turn our attention back to the political dynamics on Capitol Hill. Beyond the bills and votes, the House floor often sees these moments of tribute, right? But also some very sharp partisan divide.
Absolutely. It gives you a glimpse into the human side of Congress.
Yeah, the people behind the policy.
Exactly. These moments are where you see members acknowledging the diverse communities they represent and sometimes the values that underpin their work. We heard quite a few heartfelt tributes this week.
Like who?
For example, Dr. Audrey Rivera Gomez, who is the Mexican consul in Santa Ana. She was celebrated for her service promoting educational and cultural programs, working on fentanyl prevention, supporting women entrepreneurs. She was even named Woman of the Year 2025.
That's a wonderful recognition of community service. Any others focused on dedication like that?
Yes, and also powerful tributes to those who serve the nation in uniform.
Sure.
Rick Whittington, a U.S. Navy veteran, served with the Seabees in Vietnam.
Seabees, okay.
He's honored not just for his service, but also his later civilian work on nuclear waste disposal. And it was noted he showed incredible resolve, especially considering the harassment he faced from anti-war protesters when he came home.
That's tough, a reminder of that era.
Definitely. And also Corporal George Ivanov, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. He was honored on his 100th birthday.
100th birthday, amazing.
Yeah, honored for his valor in the Pacific Theater during World War II, places like Peleliu and Okinawa. Survived severe combat wounds, earned 2 Purple Hearts. These stories really remind us of the sacrifices made.
Such incredible bravery and dedication over a lifetime. Were there tributes to maybe more everyday heroes or people inspiring change now?
Absolutely. Matt Harding, an Iowa physics teacher, was celebrated. He's a finalist for the 2025 Presidential Awards in Mathematics and Science Teaching, recognized for inspiring his students.
Great to see teachers getting recognized.
Yes. And a really poignant moment was the celebration for Eden Alexander. He's a constituent from New Jersey who just returned home safely after being held captive by Hamas terrorists for 584 days since the October 7th attacks.
Oh, wow. 584 days. That's incredible news he's back.
A huge relief, clearly. So, yeah, it's clear that despite all the intense policy battles, there's this strong human element on Capitol Hill. You see it in these moving tributes to people who embody resilience, service, community impact.
And beyond the individual tributes, there were also these more somber moments reflecting on recent tragedies, unfortunately.
Yes, sadly. Including a moment of silence for Specialist Marin Michael Rose, who was a 19-year-old Iowa Army National Guard member who passed away recently.
Very young.
And tragically, Jane Marie Hunt, a 9-year-old girl, was lost in that catastrophic flash flood down in Hunt, Texas on July 4th.
Oh, I heard about that flood. Awful.
Yeah. She was honored for her vibrant life, her talents, her deep faith. There was also a moment of silence held for 3 lives lost in those terrible floods in Ruidoso, New Mexico, including 2 young children, and also for communities hit by flooding in central Texas. These moments really underscore the very real human impact of events, far beyond Washington's control.
Definitely puts things in perspective. Okay, shifting from tributes back to tensions, those partisan divides were certainly visible this week, too. I heard concerns raised about political violence.
That's right. There was discussion noting it's been a year since the assassination attempt on President Trump's life, and now there are new concerns about violent rhetoric, this time directed toward ICE agents. So a plea was made on the floor for that kind of rhetoric to stop,
Right.
emphasizing that violence is never the answer.
Unnecessary reminder. Any other political maneuvering or events highlighted?
Well, in related news, President Trump is scheduled to join Senator Dave McCormick in Pittsburgh soon for the Pennsylvania Energy and Innovation Summit. It's meant to highlight Pennsylvania's role in energy dominance and AI development, citing recent historic investments there.
Okay. And on the other side, there was a sharp critique regarding U.S. food aid.
Yes, Mr. Magaziner of Rhode Island called out the Trump administration, alleging they froze life-saving food aid for malnourished children globally.
Froze food aid.
That's the allegation, leading, he claims, to over 70,000 child deaths this year. He urged immediate restoration of that aid.
That's a very serious charge.
She is. And also on the economic front, Mrs. Capture of Ohio critiqued President Trump's threat of a 35% tariff against Canada.
Tariffs on Canada.
Yeah, she called it economic malpractice, saying it would be devastating for Ohio jobs, particularly since apparently over 100,000 jobs in her state rely on trade with Canada.
Okay. Judicial nominations also stirred things up. I saw something about the Sixth Circuit Court.
Yes, the Senate voted on Whitney D. Hermendorfer for the Sixth Circuit. This nomination drew criticism as President Trump's first judicial nominee for his second term.
What were the concerns?
Critics raised issues about her, quote, unyielding fealty to Donald Trump, a perceived lack of extensive trial experience, and her refusal during hearings to acknowledge the results of the 2020 election.
Familiar themes there. What about immigration policy, specifically temporary protected status?
Right, TPS for Afghans. There's a significant debate over the Trump administration's reported plan to eliminate TPS for Afghans.
Including those who helped U.S. troops.
Exactly, including those who risked their lives helping U.S. forces, potentially forcing them to return to Afghanistan, a country the State Department currently warns Americans not to visit due to danger. This was called a sad decision on the floor, one that impacts the U.S.'s reputation.
A difficult situation. And speaking of controversial topics, I saw Mr. Khanna brought up the Epstein files.
Yes. Representative Ro Khanna from California introduced an amendment demanding the full release of the Epstein files.
All right.
He framed it very starkly as a quote of, whose side are we on, protecting the powerful or protecting the people?
Trying to force a vote on that. And tax policy came up again related to gambling?
There was discussion around Representative Dinah Titus's Fair Bet Act. She's from Nevada, of course.
Right. Las Vegas.
Her bill seeks to reverse a provision in H.R. 1, that Triple B bill, which eliminated the 100% deduction for gambling losses against gambling winnings.
Why does that matter?
Well, the argument is that not allowing the deduction creates phantom income, meaning you might win $1,000 but lose $1,000 on the same night, netting zero. But under the new rule, you could still be taxed on the $1,000 win without deducting the loss.
Ah, I see. So you pay tax on money you didn't actually keep.
Exactly. And the concern is this drives gamblers away from regulated markets toward illegal underground ones.
Okay. Finally, the legacy of John R. Lewis came up quite a bit.
It absolutely did. There was extensive discussion marking 5 years since his passing. Members emphasized the ongoing fight against voter suppression and renewed calls to pass the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act.
Good trouble.
Precisely. Members quoted Lewis on democracy being an act and the importance of making good trouble necessary trouble. They used his legacy to criticize recent bills like H.R. 1, arguing they cut social programs to benefit the wealthy, which they see as counter to his life's work.
A powerful contrast. Any other specific issues tied into these broader debates?
Yeah, briefly, we also heard concerns raised about rising crime in Milwaukee, including a recent fatal police shooting there, and also some criticism of low-income housing tax credits, which were actually extended in H.R. 1, with the argument being that they allegedly discourage work.
Okay.
And one more point on foreign policy. Criticism directed at President Trump over perceived delays in providing weapons to NATO allies for Ukraine's defense, and repeated extensions of ceasefire deadlines, with calls for deeds rather than hollow threats.
A lot of friction points there. Now, let's maybe zoom out a bit and take that deeper dive into the context and analysis. History often gives us perspective, right?
It really does. And we saw glimpses of that this week. For example, there was a mention of the Pittman-Robertson Act from way back in 1937.
Pittman-Robertson. What's that?
It established this long-standing model for conservation funding. It uses excise taxes on firearms, ammunition, and archery equipment, and that money now helps support wetlands protection, among other things.
So a tax on hunting gear funds conservation.
Essentially, yes. It shows how some really old laws continue to have an impact today, sometimes in unexpected ways.
Interesting. How about more recent history that still echoes?
While the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War and the fall of Saigon was discussed, there were tributes honoring both South Vietnamese and American soldiers, and even a congressional resolution proposed to sort of carry this history forward.
And we heard personal stories tied to that.
Exactly. The experiences of Rick Whittington, the Navy Seabee we mentioned, and Colonel Carlisle Smith, Smitty Harris, who was a POW in Vietnam for 8 years. Their stories were woven into that historical reflection. It really highlights the long shadow that conflict still casts.
8 years as a POW, unimaginable.
Incredible resilience. And Senator Grassley from Iowa also brought up history, recollecting the Great Flood of 1993 that devastated his state.
The 93 flood, right.
He drew parallels to current flooding events and talked about lessons learned in disaster response and building resilience. It shows how even past environmental disasters can, or maybe should, inform today's policy.
Shifting to policy evolution, how did this week's activity reflect the ongoing healthcare debate?
Well, there's that direct reference comparing current insurance rates under the framework influenced by the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare versus pre-Obamacare rates, and then connecting how H.R. 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, is now projected to impact those rates again. It just shows the constant back and forth, the evolution and contention around healthcare in the U.S.
It never seemed settled.
Rarely. And similarly, there was a callback to civil rights milestones. Someone mentioned the Richmond Fire Department's desegregation back in 1963.
Why bring that up now?
It was used to directly connect that historical progress to the ongoing legacy of John R. Lewis and the current fights over civil rights and voting access. It's a way of saying these battles from the past are still very much alive today.
Okay, moving on to the broader policy impact, the ripple effects. H.R. 1 is clearly central.
Absolutely central. And the views on its impact couldn't be more different. You have proponents seeing it as this major boost for the economy and taxpayers.
The American dream argument.
Right. And then you have opponents warning of really severe consequences. Loss of health care, cuts to food aid, higher energy costs, especially hitting vulnerable groups and the working class hardest. It's just a fundamental disagreement about what this bill will actually do.
Its foundational effects are really what's being debated.
Exactly. And how it could reshape daily life for millions.
Now, on cybersecurity, you mentioned several bills. How do they reflect bigger concerns?
Well, legislation like the Consumer Safety Technology Act, using AI for safety, and the NTIA Policy and Cybersecurity Coordination Act, they directly reflect these growing anxieties about data security, cyber threats, especially from foreign adversaries.
Keeping our networks safe.
Yes, and the need for really robust safeguards for our communication networks. In a world that's just increasingly online, these bills are basically Congress trying to keep pace with technology and its risks, trying to protect you in this evolving digital landscape.
What about the impact on, say, agriculture or the environment?
We saw bills like the Precision Agriculture Satellite Connectivity Act that's aimed at using tech advancements to help farmers enhance productivity, showing how technology can really transform rural life.
Tech meets farming.
Right. And then on the environmental side, things like the Sinkhole Mapping Act or the Wetlands Conservation and Access Improvement Act, they show Congress addressing specific environmental hazards and conservation needs, kind of proactive measures for public safety and ecological health.
And military service was acknowledged too.
Yes. Through various discussions and some specific bills, like the Alaska Native Vietnam-era Veterans Land Allotment Extension Act, it shows ongoing efforts to address past wrongs, like unfulfilled land promises, and to honor the sacrifices made by veterans.
Okay. Finally, let's maybe pull back the curtain a bit on the legislative process itself. How did the House actually operate this week? What did a typical day look like?
Well, the House usually convened around noon, called to order by the Speaker pro tempore this week. It was often Mrs. Kim. Then you have the traditional proceedings, prayers, led by the chaplain, Reverend Margaret Grun-Kibben.
Okay.
Then approval of the previous day's journal, which is the official record, and the Pledge of Allegiance, often led by a designated member, Mr. Wilson of South Carolina, led it one day this week.
So a set routine to start things off.
Exactly. It's this daily routine, sometimes overlooked, but it's really the foundational layer. It creates the structure for everything else that happens on the floor.
And we heard about some legislative tools used to speed things up. Suspension of the rules.
Right. Passing bills under suspension of the rules is a common procedural move. It requires a two-thirds majority vote, so a higher threshold than usual.
Why use it then?
It's often used to quickly move bills that are considered non-controversial or have really broad bipartisan support. It bypasses some of the more complex procedural steps, accelerating passage.
Got it. A fast track for agreeable stuff. What about unanimous consent?
Unanimous consent requests are another tool for efficiency. We saw them used, for instance, to allow members to revise and extend their remarks in the Congressional Record after they've spoken. It just means everyone agrees to let it happen without a formal vote, saving time.
And roll call votes. That's when they record everyone's vote.
Exactly. The yeas and nays, that's where you see the specific breakdown of support or opposition for a bill or amendment.
Okay.
And you also mentioned personal explanations.
Right. What are those?
That's a way for members who are absent during a vote to state for the official record how they would have voted if they had been present. It doesn't change the outcome, but it ensures their position is formally noted.
It's definitely a complex dance with lots of specific rules. And what about the committee work? We don't always hear about that.
That's true, and it's crucial. While the floor debates get the attention, much of Congress's real heavy lifting happens in committees.
Hearings and markups?
Precisely. Committees hold hearings to gather information, hear from experts, stakeholders, people affected by potential laws. Then they have markups, which is where they actually go through a bill line by line, debating, drafting, amending it, before it can even reach the full House or Senate floor. A lot of detailed policy work happens there, often away from the CSAN cameras.
So the floor debate is really just the final stage for many bills.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
And one more piece. Checks and balances, oversight. We saw an example this week with that Government Accountability Office GAO report on the assassination attempt last year on former President Trump.
What did the GAO find?
The report highlighted several issues with the Secret Service's performance that day. Problems with security measures, communication breakdowns, the counter-drone system, decisions made by the advance team.
So holding agencies accountable.
Exactly. It demonstrates how these independent oversight bodies examine how federal agencies are doing their jobs, ensuring they're accountable to Congress, and ultimately to the public.
Okay, that's helpful context. Now, as we look ahead, what's next for some of the pending legislation we've talked about? H.R. 1, for example.
Well, remember how proponents called H.R. 1 a down payment on the full farm bill? That signals pretty clearly that more legislative work on agricultural policy is expected. That story isn't over.
Right, and the voting rights fight.
Also far from over. We heard some members reiterate their commitment to reintroduce the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, Congress after Congress, until they pass. So expect that debate to continue.
And what about the situation with temporary protected status for Afghans?
That remains really uncertain. The debate over the Trump administration's plan to potentially eliminate TPS for Afghans will likely continue, and the outcome has huge implications for those individuals, especially those who helped U.S. troops.
A lot of lives hanging in the balance there. And the Epstein files. Any movement expected?
Well, the push is ongoing. Representative Khanna and others are calling for a vote on releasing the files, demanding action to bring transparency to that situation. We'll see if that gains traction.
Okay. And thinking about infrastructure and the courts.
On infrastructure, that hydropower relicensing issue, activity there is projected to basically double in the next decade.
Double. Wow.
Yeah, so transparency and potential reforms in that FERC process will become even more critical. Expect continued focus there. And on the courts, the confirmation process for Whitney Hermendorfer to the Sixth Circuit is really just the beginning. We can likely expect many more judicial nominees from the Trump administration in the coming months and years. It signals a renewed focus on shaping the federal judiciary.
Definitely something to watch. Looking at the broader trends now, what are some potential consequences we might see unfold in the coming months from all this activity?
Well, the biggest ongoing story will likely be the economic and social impact of H.R. 1. That debate will absolutely continue as the reported consequences or benefits, depending on your view, start to materialize.
We'll see how those projections actually play out for real people.
Exactly. Healthcare access, food assistance costs, energy prices. We'll be watching how those things change or don't change for millions of Americans.
What about technology leadership?
There's clearly a continued strong emphasis on ensuring U.S. leadership in critical technologies. Wireless, like 6G is a big one, and semiconductor innovation.
Chips.
Yeah, the National Semiconductor Technology Center up in Albany, New York, working on EUV research, that's extreme ultraviolet lithography, the really cutting-edge stuff for making tiny, powerful chips. That's a prime example of this major push for technological dominance, often framed in competition with China.
And cybersecurity threats, they're not going away, are they?
No, if anything, they're just increasing in complexity and danger. So that necessitates continuous efforts, both legislative, like the bills we saw, and from government agencies, to try and safeguard everything from your personal data to critical national infrastructure.
And environmental issues.
Climate change impacts mean we'll need continued action on things like sinkhole mapping, water management, hydropower resilience. These issues driven by environmental changes aren't going away either. And unfortunately, based on this week, we can probably anticipate the persistence of pretty harsh, violent rhetoric and deep partisan divisions within Congress itself.
That seems likely. What about foreign policy and humanitarian aid implications?
Well, the fallout from the alleged freeze on feed aid for malnourished children and the ongoing debate over TPS for Afghans, those will certainly continue to shape perceptions of U.S. humanitarian and foreign policy globally.
It impacts how America is viewed on the world stage.
And lastly, underlying all of this, there's that ongoing call from members of Congress, from activists, for citizens like you to participate in democracy beyond just casting a ballot, trying to impact policy, hold representatives accountable for the decisions made in your name.
What a week on Capitol Hill indeed. We've seen these deep legislative divisions, especially around H.R. 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. But importantly, also significant bipartisan efforts on things like technology, conservation, public safety.
It's a mixed bag, for sure.
And it really underscores how these congressional actions and debates directly shape your daily life, from, healthcare costs and access to food, to the security of your phone, and even the reliability of the power in your home.
It's definitely a reminder that democracy is truly an act, as the late, great Congressman John Lewis so powerfully put it. He championed that idea of making good trouble, necessary trouble, to effect change.
Pushing for progress even when it's hard.
Exactly, even when facing formidable obstacles.
So, as you, our listeners, reflect on everything we've discussed today, maybe consider how that concept of good trouble, standing up for what you believe is right, might apply to navigating and influencing this complex, often contentious landscape of American politics today.
Yeah, how can one person, through their voice and actions, contribute to what they believe is right, even when facing big challenges? How do we work towards what Lewis called a beloved community in such a diverse nation? Big questions.
They are. And on a practical note, we encourage you to explore the bills we've talked about. You can go to congress.gov and search using the bill numbers we mentioned, like H.R. 1 or S-433 for the Manufacturing Council.
Yeah, read them for yourself. And you can always contact your own representatives. Share your stories. Make your voice heard. As Representative Bynum apparently encouraged her constituents this week, your input really is vital.
And if you're interested in diving even deeper, keep an eye out for upcoming committee hearings. They're usually public. For instance, the Senate Judiciary Committee has a hearing scheduled on AI industry's mass ingestion of copyrighted works for AI training coming up on July 16th.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, and the House Financial Services Committee is holding one on Home 2.0, modern solutions to the housing shortage, also on July 16th. These are just a couple of examples of the many ways you can stay engaged and informed.
Absolutely. Remember, participating in democracy really does extend far beyond just voting day. It includes advocacy, community engagement, and just staying informed about the legislative processes that shape our country.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. We look forward to guiding you through more of the complexities of Congress next time on Congress in Context.